What would you do if you bought an apartment in a building that was about to be demolished? And at night, you heard footsteps coming from an empty unit. This story will make you question reality and wonder what really happens at night. Until recently, I lived with my parents in a suburb of a small American town. Our house was in a quiet neighborhood, where visitors were a rarity. My parents were always strict, and their rules seemed unbreakable. The only friend I had who could somewhat connect with them was Alex, though I called him Lex. We met back in elementary school, and since then, he was like an older brother to me. Unlike my parents, who preferred to criticize my mistakes, Lex was always there with advice and support. Lex had faced many challenges in his life. His mother was an alcoholic, and she spent most of the child support payments his father sent on booze. Lex had to start working from a young age, learning to take care of himself and others. Despite his tough childhood, he somehow managed to juggle work and dating. I even envied his success with girls a little. When Lex turned 18, his mother passed away, and he inherited the apartment they lived in. This gave him the freedom I still lacked while living with my parents. One night, he came over while my parents were out at the theater, so we had some time alone. We chatted about various topics until he proposed an idea that immediately grabbed my attention. "Hey, I've got a plan," Lex said with a wide grin. "You could buy yourself an apartment on the outskirts of town for cheap." "An apartment?" I repeated, barely believing my ears. Lex explained that there was an old building nearby that was about to be declared unsafe and demolished. The local authorities promised to relocate all the tenants to new buildings. He suggested I buy a unit in that building, live there for a bit, and then get a new, free apartment in a modern complex. "Are you suggesting I live in a building that could collapse at any moment?" I asked, skeptical. "Come on, you'll only be there a couple of months. Plus, you'll get moved to a new 2-bedroom for free," Lex assured me. I thought about his proposal. It seemed risky, but if everything went as planned, it could be a fantastic opportunity. The next day, I told my parents about Lex's idea. After a lengthy discussion, to my surprise, they agreed. We arranged to meet with the seller to check out the apartment. At the meeting, the seller turned out to be a young guy who inherited the place. He had no emotional attachment to it and was eager to get rid of it quickly. We settled on a price, and I signed the papers. The apartment was on the 4th floor of the old building. When we stepped inside, the musty smell hit me like a wave, as if generations of stray cats had lived there. The wallpaper was peeling, the windows were cracked, and the ceiling looked like it could cave in at any moment. But Lex insisted these were just temporary inconveniences, and in a few months I'd be moving into a new place. I wasn't superstitious, but I felt a slight unease about living in such a rundown space. Lex left, and I was alone in the apartment. Soon, I decided to head out to buy something for dinner. On my way back, I noticed a woman standing by the entrance, smoking and looking at me with interest. "Who are you?" she asked. "I live here," I replied. We struck up a conversation. Her name was Ludmila. She had lived in this building her whole life and had no plans to leave, despite the authorities' promises to relocate the tenants. Ludmila told me about another resident, Boris Anatolievich, an old man who had served in the Navy. He lost his family in an accident and had been living alone ever since. She warned me that he was a bit strange and advised me to keep my doors locked at night. That night, I locked all the doors, but sleep wouldn't come. Strange sounds came from above, as if someone was moving furniture. I knocked on the radiator, and the noise stopped. The next day, I asked Ludmila about Boris. She smiled and confirmed that his apartment was above mine. According to her, the old man was on the brink of insanity. I laughed it off and went to school, but the oddities didn't end there. Late one evening, returning home, I saw Ludmila again by the entrance. She looked worried. "Sergey, I don't know what to do," she said, her voice trembling. I was standing here, smoking, and then I saw the light turn on in my apartment. Ludmila lived alone, and her words shocked me. I suggested we check her apartment. Inside, no one was there, but my unease lingered. That night, I heard noises from above again, crashes, footsteps, and sounds like glass shattering. My anxiety grew. The next morning, I decided to call the police and report the strange happenings related to Boris. They arrived quickly and forced open his door, as the old man wouldn't answer. What we found inside shocked everyone. So my eyes slowly scanned the ceiling. Then I turned toward the window. It was still dark outside, but the faint streetlight filtered through the curtains, casting weak shadows in the room. The noises from above didn't stop, growing louder and clearer, as if something or someone was running around the apartment. What was happening in this old building? I could feel my heart racing as the sounds intensified, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. I shot up from the bed. My body was tense, my heart pounding in my chest. "This can't be happening," I muttered to myself, recalling that the police had taken Boris Anatolievich just yesterday. But the footsteps above persisted, and it became clear that I wasn't alone in this house. Overwhelmed by panic, I bolted for the door, quickly grabbing my phone and keys, and rushed out into the stairwell. The sounds above continued, now more sinister, as if someone was not just running but chasing. Soon I found myself outside. The air was cool, but I barely felt it. My fear was consuming. The entrance behind me was dark, and it seemed like no one was left inside but whoever or whatever was upstairs. This can't be real, I repeated. The decision to go back to my parents' house came instantly. I dashed to the street and started hailing a taxi. While waiting for the car, I kept glancing back at the now eerily empty entrance. When the taxi finally arrived, I slid into the back seat, and without looking back, told the driver to go. It didn't matter that I had left my apartment in such a hurry without my things. What mattered was getting as far away from that cursed place as possible. Half an hour later, I was at my parents' house, trying to calm myself down. My mom noticed something was off, but I refused to tell her what had happened. My dad gave me a restrained look, saying nothing, though his gaze spoke volumes. I told you not to get involved in this. I went back to my room, attempting to sleep. But even hours later, the noises lingered in my mind. Footsteps, crashes, Ludmila's scream, all echoing in my memory. The next day, I called Lex. He was surprised to get my call at such an early hour, but I felt compelled to tell him everything. After I finished my story, there was silence on the other end of the line. Then Lex said calmly, "You know, I think you were right. That old man was definitely off, but something's not right. Get out of there and never go back." And that's exactly what I did. I returned to my apartment just to grab my belongings, but never spent another night there. Later, I learned that the building was demolished and the tenants relocated to new housing. A crack in the wall that once seemed minor became the reason for the structure's collapse just months after I left. Even after many years, I still find myself wondering what really happened in that apartment, and was Boris Anatolievich truly the only one I needed to fear?